13 diet secrets from the 1960s that kept everyone skinny. What if staying in shape didn't require gym memberships, diet apps, or willpower? Back in the 1960s, it didn't. People stayed slim without even trying, just by living differently. In this video, we're revealing 13 forgotten habits from the 60s that kept waistlines trim and lives simple. Stick around. Some of these old-school secrets might just change how you see health today. Never snacking between meals. Can you imagine going a whole day without reaching for a snack? Sounds wild today, doesn't it? In our modern world, snack options are everywhere. Protein bars, chips, cookies, you name it. They're in office drawers, glove compartments, even tucked into purses for emergencies. But back in the 1960s, that kind of snacking just wasn't a thing. In those days, the kitchen had unofficial opening and closing hours. Meals were served at fixed times, and once breakfast was over, the fridge and pantry were off limits until lunch. Try sneaking a snack back then, and you'd likely hear a sharp but familiar warning from Mom. You'll ruin your dinner. And it wasn't said with anger, it was just how things were done. Meals had their place, and grazing all day wasn't part of the routine. Why? Well, for starters, the snack food industry was still in its infancy. There weren't endless supermarket shelves filled with brightly colored packaging, screaming for your attention. You might find a few cookies or some penny candy at the corner store, but nothing like the processed snack explosion we see today. Plus, main meals were made from scratch. Real meat, vegetables, grains, nothing from a packet. Those meals were filling in the truest sense, packed with nutrients, fiber, and natural fats that kept hunger at bay for hours. This habit of sticking to 3 square meals gave the body the chance to fully process what was eaten. Without constant nibbling, insulin levels stayed steady, avoiding those sugar crashes that leave us reaching for yet another bite. And when insulin is stable, the body can actually start tapping into stored fat for energy. There was also something deeply satisfying about showing up to the dinner table truly hungry. People took their time eating, savoring the food, enjoying the company, and listening to their body's natural signals. Today, we call that mindful eating, but back then, it was just called dinner. So, yes, it might seem like a tiny change, but skipping snacks between meals gave the digestive system a break, helped control weight naturally, and even made food taste better. A simple habit that kept waistlines trim, and one that's almost disappeared in today's snack-happy culture. Portion sizes were much, much smaller. This next secret might just catch you off guard, especially when you think about today's go big or go home approach to food. In the 1960s, portion sizes were a completely different story. In fact, they were downright tiny by today's standards. Picture this. A burger from a diner back then was about the size of your palm. Small, modest, just enough to hit the spot. Now think about today's burgers, overflowing and often bigger than the plate itself. And that large soda? In the 60s, a large was only 8 ounces. That's smaller than some of today's smallest fast food drinks. Even dinner plates at home were smaller, about 9 inches across compared to the jumbo 12-inch plates we commonly use now. This change in size wasn't just practical, it had a surprising psychological benefit. When a modest amount of food was placed on a small plate, it looked full. It felt like a full meal. And at the movies, instead of everyone having their own bucket of popcorn, it was more common to share one. Same with desserts, maybe a scoop of ice cream split between 2 people, not a triple scoop sundae just for one. The idea of supersizing your meal simply didn't exist yet. No one was trying to get the biggest bang for their buck in calories. People ate what was served, felt satisfied, and went about their day. There was no guilt, no food tracking, no fighting the urge to finish a mountain of fries. It wasn't about willpower. It was just how things were. And today's science backs this up. Studies show that when you're served more, you eat more, even if you're not really hungry. The simple act of eating off a smaller plate or being offered a smaller portion naturally helps control how much you consume. Back in the 60s, people didn't have to diet. Their lifestyle did the work for them. Small portions, small plates, and no pressure to overeat. Just a simple, powerful habit that helped keep weight in check. maybe it's time we go back to thinking small. People walked everywhere. Today, we block out time for workouts, suit up in gym clothes, drive to fitness centers, and obsessively count our steps and calories with smart devices. But in the 1960s, movement wasn't something you scheduled, it was simply baked into daily life. Nobody owned a step counter. People didn't go walking for cardio. They walked because they had to. Kids strolled or pedaled their bikes to school, rain or shine. Adults ran errands on foot, walked to the post office or the corner store, or popped over to a neighbor's house for a quick chat. Walking wasn't a goal. It was the default mode of getting around. But the activity didn't stop there. Back then, household tasks were far more labor-intensive. No dishwashers meant scrubbing plates by hand several times a day. No clothes dryers meant hauling damp laundry outside to line dry. Want to change the TV channel? Get up and turn the dial. And those garage doors, you had to open them yourself. Men stayed active with regular yard work. No self-propelled mowers, just good old-fashioned push models that gave your arms and legs a solid workout. Fixing things around the house required physical effort, and shopping meant more than just a stroll through one big box store. It meant walking from shop to shop, often carrying bags along the way. All this activity wasn't intense or planned. It was low effort, steady movement throughout the day. Today, fitness experts call this NEAT, non-exercise activity thermogenesis, the calories burned during everyday motions that aren't part of a workout. It turns out, this kind of natural, continuous movement is one of the most powerful tools for maintaining a healthy weight and metabolism. Back in the 60s, folks didn't need gyms to stay fit. They just lived actively. And in our more sedentary world today, taking a page from their book, by walking more, doing our own chores, or simply moving with purpose, might be one of the easiest ways to boost our health without breaking a sweat. Which of these 1960s habits do you remember from your own childhood, or wish we still followed today? Manual labor was normal. Back in the 1960s, you didn't need a gym membership to stay in shape. Burning calories wasn't something you planned or tracked. It just happened because life demanded it. Men came home physically tired, not from sitting at a desk all day, but from jobs that involved real effort. Lifting, hauling, building, or working long hours on farms or in factories. Their bodies moved constantly, not in structured workouts, but through the demands of labor. Women, especially homemakers, were no less active. Their days were packed with physical tasks, cleaning, tidying, cooking, laundry. But these chores weren't the push-button kind we know today. Mondays were for laundry, which meant scrubbing clothes, wringing them out, carrying baskets up and down stairs, and hanging everything to dry outside. Floors were cleaned on hands and knees. Windows wiped with elbow grease, and vacuums were heavy and loud. Ironing? That could take hours, and there were no shortcuts. It's been estimated that a homemaker in the 60s could burn over 1,000 more calories a day just doing housework, about the same as running a 10K, but it was spread out in natural bursts of movement, not all at once. And kids? After school, they didn't sit inside glued to screens. They rode bikes, climbed trees, played tag, jumped rope, and ran around the neighborhood until the streetlights came on or mom called them in for dinner. Play was physical, creative, and outdoors. Exercise wasn't its own activity. Movement was part of everything. It happened through work, chores, errands, and play. This constant low-intensity activity kept the metabolism humming all day long and made staying slim feel effortless. The takeaway isn't that we need to return to scrubbing floors by hand. It's that our bodies were designed to move throughout the day, not just in bursts at the gym. Reintroducing natural movement into daily life, even through simple choices like walking more, taking the stairs, or doing chores by hand, can quietly make a big impact on our health, just like it did back then. Everything was cooked from scratch. Today, we've got convenience at our fingertips. Microwave dinners, bottled sauces, ready-to-bake cake mixes, you name it. Cooking from scratch is now seen as a healthy trend, part of the clean eating movement. But in the 1960s, it wasn't a fad. It was just everyday life. There were no frozen TV dinners or pre-made pasta sauces waiting on a store shelf. If you wanted soup, you made it, from scratch. If you wanted cake, you measured the flour, cracked the eggs, softened the butter, and got to work. Most ingredients came fresh from the market or even from your backyard garden. Milk came in glass bottles. Butter was churned. Even something as simple as salad dressing was mixed by hand, using oil, vinegar, and whatever spices were on hand. All that effort made a big difference. For one, cooking your own meals gave you total control over what went into your food. No artificial additives, no sneaky sugars, no sodium overload, just whole, honest ingredients. Second, because making sweets or rich dishes took real time and energy. Things like cakes and pies weren't everyday treats. They were for birthdays, holidays, or Sunday dinners. Special occasions that made indulgence feel, well, special. This naturally led to less processed food and fewer empty calories. Homemade portions were usually more modest, simply because you made only what was needed. And since the food was rich in real nutrients, it filled you up without the need for seconds or snacks an hour later. When food tastes real and your body gets what it truly needs, you don't overeat, you don't need to. Cooking from scratch might have taken more time, but it also added more care. That effort helped families stay healthy without obsessing over calories or cutting carbs. It wasn't about dieting, it was about nourishment and love. Maybe today, in our rush to save time, we've lost a bit of that connection. Slowing down to cook a meal from real ingredients might just be one of the simplest and most powerful ways to take care of our health and each other. Family dinner was sacred. Back in the 1960s, dinner wasn't just about filling your stomach. It was a cherished tradition, a sacred part of the daily routine. Every evening, right around 6 o'clock, families came together at the dinner table. No distractions, no TV blaring in the background, and certainly no scrolling on phones. They didn't even exist yet. It was simply a time for food, family, and connection. The table was often thoughtfully set, sometimes with a cloth or placemats, and everyone had their regular seat. There was a sense of order and respect. People used proper utensils, said grace in some households, and gave full attention to one another. Meals were eaten slowly and shared meaningfully. No one was scarfing down their plate in front of a screen or multitasking between bites. Instead, dinner was filled with conversation, stories from the school day, news from work, laughs, lessons, and a chance to really check in. This atmosphere naturally encouraged mindful eating. People ate at a gentle pace, giving their bodies enough time to register fullness and satisfaction, long before dessert ever hit the table. Food portions were reasonable too. Plates weren't overloaded from the get-go. Most homes served food from the kitchen or placed just 1 or 2 dishes in the center, so if you wanted more, you had to ask. This simple step made people more aware of what they were eating and how much. It wasn't about restriction, it was about respect. Food was appreciated, not taken for granted or mindlessly consumed. This nightly ritual did more than just nourish the body. It built a healthy relationship with food and with loved ones. It created structure, stability, and a sense of togetherness. In a world where meals now happen in front of laptops, in cars, or at odd hours, the idea of sitting down for a quiet, undisturbed family dinner might just be one of the most powerful and overlooked health habits of the past. What was your favorite home-cooked meal growing up? Was it made from scratch like in the 60s? Fresh food was the only option. If you could travel back in time and walk into a 1960s grocery store, you'd be amazed, not just by what was on the shelves, but by what wasn't. You wouldn't see endless freezer aisles packed with microwave dinners, frozen pizzas, or tubs of novelty ice cream. And those towering displays of boxed snacks, processed meals, and pre-flavored everything? They didn't exist. Instead, what you would find was food in its most natural form, fresh, local, and seasonal. Strawberries only showed up in June, apples were an autumn treat, and asparagus in winter? Forget it. That wasn't called limited, it was just how life worked. The food you bought had been picked ripe and traveled a short distance, which meant better taste and better nutrition. Tomatoes were rich and flavorful, not bland and waxy. Shopping trips were more frequent because nothing lasted long. There were no preservatives to stretch shelf life. You visited the butcher for your meat, he might have even known your name, and he'd cut it the way you liked. Milk came straight to your door in glass bottles from the milkman. Bread was dense, hearty, and made from real grains, not filled with air and sugar. Even vegetables came with dirt still clinging to them. And butter? It was actual churned butter, not a mystery blend of oils and additives. Here's what made all this so powerful. Fresh, whole foods filled you up. A real baked potato with its skin gave lasting satisfaction compared to instant flakes in a box. Whole veggies were packed with natural fiber and nutrients. There were no artificial flavor enhancers, no hidden sugars, and no preservatives pushing your body to crave more. Because the food was so real and nutrient-dense, your body naturally stopped eating when it had enough. There was no need to count calories or follow strict diets. Satiety came with every bite. And the absence of added chemicals meant your body could trust what it was getting. Bringing this old-school approach back into our modern lives, eating with the seasons, choosing whole ingredients, shopping local, could be one of the most impactful ways to reclaim our health. Sometimes the best solutions are the ones we left behind. Sugar was an occasional treat. If you walked into a typical 1960s kitchen, you'd notice something surprising right away. Sugar wasn't everywhere. Unlike today, it wasn't hiding in almost every item on the shelves or served with every meal. Back then, sugar had a specific role. It was for special moments, not a daily staple. Kids didn't grow up with endless access to cookies, candy, and soda. A slice of birthday cake or a scoop of ice cream was a big deal. Something you looked forward to, not something you expected every evening. Dessert wasn't automatically served after dinner, and if it was often homemade and portioned modestly. Even foods we now assume should be sugary, like breakfast cereal, were simpler and less sweet back then. The few sugary cereals that did exist were considered occasional indulgences, not breakfast standards. And soft drinks? They came in tiny 6.5-ounce glass bottles, just enough to satisfy a craving without overloading your system. Most importantly, sugar was visible. It was a spoonful in your coffee, a bit of icing on a cake. It wasn't buried in ketchup, pasta sauce, packaged bread, or salad dressings the way it is today. This meant people weren't unknowingly eating sugar throughout the day. The result? Sugar intake was low and deliberate. Taste buds weren't constantly overstimulated, so even an apple or a lightly sweetened cereal tasted just right. And when you didn't crave sugar constantly, you didn't overeat it. Blood sugar levels stayed steady. Energy didn't spike and crash, and the body was able to burn fat more efficiently. By keeping sugar in its rightful place, as a treat, not a constant, people in the 60s naturally avoided many of the health issues we face today. Maybe it's time we stop seeing sugar as a given and start treating it like the special occasion it used to be. You might be surprised by how much better your body feels and how much sweeter life actually tastes. Eating on a fixed schedule. Back in the 1960s, the clock played a big role in how and when people ate. Meals didn't happen whenever. There was a rhythm, a dependable daily structure, breakfast around 7 a.m., lunch at exactly noon, and dinner at 6 p.m. These weren't casual guidelines, they were the real deal. Everyone followed them. Your day started with breakfast. Most folks never skipped it, even if they were in a rush. Lunch wasn't a quick bite grabbed at your desk. It was a set time when school, work, and even the radio paused. And dinner? It was on the table by early evening. People planned their days around meals, not the other way around. But here's what made this structure so powerful. Between meals, the kitchen was closed. There were no office snack bars, no vending machines, no mid-afternoon grazing. You ate at mealtime, and that was it. This routine trained the body beautifully. Your metabolism operated on a reliable schedule and insulin levels stayed balanced. The body knew exactly when to expect food, and it stayed in a healthier, more responsive state. Even more interesting, this fixed routine eliminated what we now call decision fatigue. You weren't constantly asking yourself, am I hungry? Should I grab something? You simply waited until the next mealtime. This created natural fasting windows between meals, something modern nutrition now calls intermittent fasting. But in the 60s, it wasn't a trend, it was just life. This consistency also helped curb mindless snacking. You weren't about to ruin your appetite 30 minutes before dinner because you respected the meal schedule, and so did your body. Over time, your hunger cues synced up with the clock, helping you digest and burn energy more efficiently. It's funny how a little structure can offer so much freedom. Freedom from cravings. Freedom from constantly thinking about food. Just a simple schedule followed daily that supported both physical health and peace of mind. Do you think modern life has made it harder to stay healthy? Or are we just doing things differently? Rarely eating out. And now, dear friends, we've arrived at perhaps the most powerful secret of them all, one that made an enormous difference in the health and waistlines of families back in the 1960s. In that era, eating out was truly a big deal. It wasn't something people did a few times a week or even once a week. For many families, going to a restaurant was a monthly treat, reserved for special occasions like a birthday, an anniversary, or a once-in-a-while night out. Eating outside the home wasn't casual, it was memorable. Here's a telling number. In 1960, only about 25% of the average American food budget was spent on eating out. Fast forward to today, and that number has doubled to nearly 50%. And it's not just the amount of money we spend, it's how we eat out that has changed dramatically. Back then, eating out often meant dressing nicely and enjoying a sit-down meal at a local restaurant, not grabbing drive-thru burgers on the way home or ordering fast food on apps 3 nights a week. Even McDonald's, which existed in 1960, was far from a national norm. It had just over 200 locations in the entire US at the time, and was seen more as a fun family stop than a go-to dinner plan. Lunch at work? It usually came from home. Packed sandwiches, thermoses of soup, maybe fruit. Buying lunch every day was uncommon, even a little indulgent. Because the majority of food was prepared and eaten at home, families had full control over what went into each meal. No surprise sugar, no excessive sodium, no deep-fried side dishes or butter-laden sauces. Meals were made from scratch with balanced portions, simple ingredients, and much less fat and salt than what's served in restaurants. And here's the big thing. Restaurant food by design is richer, more indulgent, and more calorie-dense than home-cooked meals. That's why it tastes so good. It's meant to be an experience. But that richness only works in your favor when it's occasional. Once it becomes the norm, your body starts storing all those extra calories, fats, and salts quickly. So, while eating out less might be one of the hardest habits to shift in today's ultra-convenient world, it may also be the key to reclaiming control over your health. The less often you rely on takeout or restaurant food, the more power you have to shape your nutrition, and the more those rare restaurant visits can go back to being what they once were: joyful, memorable, and guilt-free. Kids had set bedtimes, and so did adults. One of the overlooked lifestyle habits from the 1960s that played a quiet but powerful role in keeping people trim? A good night's sleep and sticking to a consistent bedtime. Back then, daily life had structure. Kids were expected to be in bed by 8 or 9 p.m., no excuses. Adults usually weren't far behind, often winding down with a book or a cup of tea, not hours of scrolling or late-night channel surfing. Remember, this was an era before 24/7 entertainment. TV stations would literally sign off at midnight with the national anthem and a static screen. That was your signal. Time for bed. This bedtime structure created a powerful domino effect. First, it eliminated late-night snacking, which is now one of the biggest culprits of unwanted weight gain. There were no glowing screens tempting you with food commercials or apps offering midnight food delivery. The kitchen was closed after dinner, and everyone respected that rule. Second, the quality of sleep was better. Without blue light from screens and distractions buzzing all night, people got deeper rest. Today, we know how critical that is. Sleep affects hormones like leptin and ghrelin. those tricky little chemicals that control hunger and fullness. Poor sleep makes you hungrier and messes with your metabolism. In the 60s, regular, uninterrupted sleep helped keep these hormones balanced without anyone even knowing it. So, while everyone's focused on diet and workouts, one of the simplest weight control secrets might just be something your parents used to say every night: time for bed. Drinks were simple and rarely full of calories. Imagine walking into a 1960s kitchen. You'd probably see a jug of cold water in the fridge, a bottle of milk on the table, and maybe a fresh pot of black coffee brewing. What you wouldn't see: rows of sugary sodas, energy drinks, sweetened iced teas, or caramel syrup-loaded coffee drinks. Back then, what people drank was simple, and that simplicity made a huge difference for their health. Soda did exist, but it wasn't a mealtime companion or something you drank every day. It came in small 6.5-ounce glass bottles and was seen as a treat, not a daily necessity. Most homes didn't keep cases of it stocked in the pantry. And juice? It was typically served in a small glass at breakfast, not guzzled all day in giant plastic bottles. Milk and water were the go-to drinks at home. If you had tea, it was unsweetened or lightly sweetened. No fancy flavors, no pumps of syrup. Here's why this matters. Today, many people unknowingly consume hundreds of calories a day just from drinks. Sugary beverages spike blood sugar, increase hunger, and make it harder to lose weight. But in the 60s, that wasn't a problem. People weren't sipping on calorie bombs all day long. They stayed hydrated and satisfied without overloading their systems with sugar and empty calories. It was a quiet kind of discipline, one that didn't require willpower, just habit. And it's one of the simplest lessons we can bring back. Stick to water, limit sweet drinks, and you'll feel and look a whole lot better. The real secret behind 1960s. Slim figures, healthy habits, or harmful pressure? Let's wrap up with one of the most revealing and complicated secrets of the 1960s. Because while much of that era's slim physique came from natural, healthy living, there was also a darker side shaped by pressure and extremes. First, it's important to understand the beauty standards of the time. In the 60s, the ideal body type shifted toward a very thin, almost delicate silhouette. Think Twiggy or Jean Shrimpton. This image wasn't just fashionable, it became expected. And that pressure to stay slim created a growing focus on weight maintenance, sometimes for health, but often just to fit in. While most people stayed in shape through simple everyday habits, home-cooked meals, regular movement, smaller portions, some took more desperate routes. Fad diets like the cabbage soup diet promised fast results but left people malnourished and miserable. Even more alarming were the medically supervised starvation programs, like the case of Gilles Lorrain, which was dramatized in the documentary A Matter of Fat. These programs were not only dangerous but emotionally damaging. Then there were diet pills, many of which contained amphetamines. In the 60s, they were often handed out with little thought to the side effects. While they curbed appetite, they also came with serious risks: addiction, heart problems, and mental health issues. Among fashion models, the extremes were even worse. Rumors of swallowing cotton balls to feel full or using laxatives to drop pounds quickly. It was a disturbing contrast to the otherwise wholesome image of the decade. And yet, here's what's fascinating. Many of the healthy routines from the 60s are now repackaged today as modern wellness trends. Eating 3 meals a day with no snacking? Now it's called intermittent fasting. Cooking from scratch with whole ingredients? That's the backbone of the Eat Clean movement. Low sugar, whole foods, and balanced meals? Sounds a lot like today's low-carb or keto-style diets. But there's a key difference. In the 60s, people didn't try to follow these habits. They simply lived them. They weren't dieting. They were just doing what came naturally based on how food was made, how time was structured, and how families functioned. The healthy choices were built into the rhythm of daily life, not forced or temporary. So, when we talk about how people stayed slim in the 1960s, we have to acknowledge both sides. Yes, it was a time of practical, real-life habits that supported wellness. But it was also a time when beauty standards led some down risky paths in the search for thinness. There was no magic bullet, no 6-minute abs, no miracle cleanse, just a lifestyle built on basic, repeated actions, healthy meals, real movement, and fewer processed temptations. Maybe the real lesson for us today isn't to chase the next diet, but to slow down and return to the simple things that worked all along. 25 things from 1960s. Once necessary, now completely obsolete. The 1960s gave us some of the most iconic inventions of the 20th century. But where did they all go? From gadgets we couldn't live without to household staples now forgotten, these once essential items tell a story of change. Ready for a nostalgic trip? Let's rediscover 25 things from the 60s that time left behind. TV antennas. TV antennas used to be a common sight, especially before cable took over. These big metal structures, often sitting high on rooftops or poles, were how families picked up their favorite TV shows. With just a turn of the dial or flip of a switch, the antenna would catch signals from far-off towers. Whether it was the evening news, a sitcom, or the weekend ball game, that antenna made sure the picture came through, fuzzy or not. Back then, choices were limited, and the antenna was your lifeline to the few channels available. Getting the best signal sometimes meant adjusting the antenna just right, often with someone yelling from the living room, "It's better! No, wait, go back!" It wasn't perfect, but it worked, and it brought people together in front of the screen. Eventually, technology moved on. Cable, satellite, and now streaming services changed everything. Most homes now use sleek digital antennas, or none at all. The old metal ones have mostly disappeared, but they're still remembered fondly. They remind us of a time when watching TV meant a little more effort, a little more patience, and maybe even climbing up on the roof. Be honest, did you ever fight with a sibling over the TV antenna? Manual typewriters. This classic machine used a clever combo of keys and metal hammers to press ink onto paper, turning out clean, professional-looking pages. The steady click-clack of typing filled offices and homes alike. It was the background noise of a working day. But using one took skill. There were no do-overs, no backspace, no spell check. If you made a mistake, you had to start over or break out the correction fluid. For many folks, the manual typewriter was more than just a tool. It was a symbol of getting things done. Secretaries, writers, and reporters all leaned on them for letters, articles, and reports. Even at home, people used them for school assignments and heartfelt notes. A good machine had a smooth feel, and each keystroke gave a satisfying snap as it stamped the page. Then came the 1970s, and electric typewriters started popping up, making typing easier with auto-return and softer keys. But once the 90s hit, personal computers and word processors changed everything. With faster typing, editing tools, and digital storage, typewriters slowly disappeared from everyday life. Punch cards. Back when computers were just getting started, punch cards were the main way to store and process data. These stiff paper cards had rows and columns where tiny holes were punched out to represent letters, numbers, or commands. IBM was a big name behind them, so people often called them IBM cards. They were used everywhere, from big companies to universities and government offices, for everything from handling payroll to running scientific experiments. Working with punch cards took a steady hand and a lot of patience. Every card had to be punched perfectly, and one wrong hole could mess up the whole program. For big projects, you'd need boxes full of these cards, sometimes thousands, all sorted in the right order. If you dropped the stack or got them out of sequence, it could take hours to fix the mess and get things running again. By the time the 1970s rolled around, better storage options like magnetic tapes and disk drives came along. These new tools made it faster and easier to enter and pull up data, and punch cards quickly became a thing of the past. Glass milk bottles. In the 1960s, glass milk bottles were a familiar sight on just about every front porch. Each morning, the milkman would show up with fresh milk, leaving full bottles and picking up the empties. These bottles weren't just throwaways, they were part of a smart, eco-friendly loop. Families would rinse them out and leave them outside, and the dairy would clean, refill, and reuse them. It was a simple system that cut down on waste long before anyone talked about going green. Glass kept the milk nice and cold, but it had its downsides too. These bottles were bulky and easy to break if you weren't careful. And in the wintertime, the milk could freeze, swell up, and sometimes push the cream right out the top of the cardboard lid. Still, people often say milk just tasted better out of glass. Richer, colder, and fresher than what we get today in plastic. By the end of the century, life had changed. People started shopping at supermarkets, and plastic jugs and paper cartons took over. They were lighter, cheaper, and didn't shatter on the kitchen floor. Party line telephones. Back in the 1960s, party line phones were a big deal, especially out in the country or in small towns where getting a private line just wasn't an option for most folks. Instead of each house having its own phone line, a bunch of homes would share the same one. So if you picked up the phone and heard someone already talking, you had to hang up and wait your turn. That could be really frustrating, especially if there was an emergency. Sure, party lines saved people money, but they also came with headaches. Privacy? Pretty much non-existent. It wasn't unusual for neighbors to listen in on each other's calls, sometimes by accident, sometimes on purpose. And gossip? It spread like wildfire. Arguments about who was hogging the phone weren't rare either, especially in houses with a lot of people or between neighbors who needed the phone at the same time. Each house had a unique ring, so you'd know if a call was for you, but that didn't always stop others from picking up just to see who was calling. By the time the century was winding down, private phone lines had become more affordable and widely available. Families were happy to leave party lines behind and enjoy the freedom of a phone line all to themselves. Film strip projectors. Back in the 1960s, film strip projectors were a big part of how we learned in school. You'd find them in classrooms, libraries, and training sessions everywhere. These machines turned regular lessons into visual stories. A film strip was just a long strip of pictures that went frame by frame, usually along with an audio track on a cassette or even an old vinyl record. The teacher would click through each frame in time with the narration, turning it into a step-by-step lesson that really stuck. They were great for subjects like history, science, or language arts. Kids would sit in a darkened classroom while bright, colorful images lit up the screen. It made the material feel alive, way more exciting than just reading from a textbook. Whether it was a folktale with drawings or a space documentary, those film strips pulled you into the story and made learning more fun. Still, these projectors had their downsides. Sometimes the film would jam, the bulb might blow out, and syncing the audio just right took a little practice. As video technology got better, schools slowly moved on to VHS tapes, then DVDs, and eventually digital tools, leaving film strip projectors behind. Slide rules. Before pocket calculators came along, slide rules were the must-have tool for anyone doing serious math. Engineers, scientists, and students all depended on them to handle tough calculations. These clever gadgets used logarithmic scales to make things like multiplication, division, powers, and trigonometry a whole lot easier. You'd slide one part along the other, line things up, and boom, you had your answer. Of course, you still had to know your math to make sense of it all. If you worked in a technical field, knowing how to use a slide rule wasn't optional, it was part of the job. Engineers used them to build everything from bridges to rockets. Even during NASA's Apollo missions, slide rules helped guide astronauts into space. They didn't need power, they didn't break easily, and they fit right in your pocket, making them a trusty sidekick for both students and pros. But once the 1970s rolled around, everything changed. Small electronic calculators hit the scene, offering instant answers with the press of a button. No more sliding or estimating, just punch in the numbers. As they got cheaper, calculators quickly took over and the slide rule faded into history. Kodak Brownie Camera. The Kodak Brownie camera, first launched way back in 1900, completely changed how people took pictures. Before that, photography was something only the rich could afford, and it took a lot of gear and know-how. But the Brownie made it simple and cheap. It had a basic box shape, was easy to carry, and came with film already inside. For the first time, regular folks could take their own pictures, family gatherings, vacations, everyday life, without needing to be an expert. This little camera was a game changer. It opened the door for millions of people to start snapping photos and saving memories. You didn't need a studio or fancy equipment anymore. Just point, shoot, and send the film in for developing. It was that easy. The Brownie stayed popular for decades because of how simple and reliable it was. But by the 1980s, things had moved on. Better film cameras and new digital models came along, and the Brownie was retired. Still, its legacy stuck around. It helped shape modern photography and made taking pictures something everyone could do. An idea that lives on in every smartphone and digital camera we use today. Home movie film reels. Back in the 1960s, saving family memories meant pulling out the film reels. Home movies weren't quick snapshots. They were special moments you had to plan for. Families would gather with their Super 8 or 16mm cameras to capture birthdays, vacations, and simple everyday life. The grainy look of the film gave everything a warm, timeless feel. But using those cameras wasn't just point and shoot. You had to load the film just right, and each reel only gave you a few minutes of recording time. After filming, you couldn't watch it right away. You had to send the reel off to be developed, and that often meant waiting days or even weeks. Once it came back, watching it was a big deal. The projector would come out, the lights went off, and the family gathered around to see their memories dance across a blank wall. That soft clicking sound from the projector and the occasional jam were just part of the fun. But film reels weren't easy to keep. They needed cool, dry storage, and projectors had to be kept in working order. Eventually, as technology moved on to VHS, camcorders, and later digital video, film reels faded away into history. What's one thing from the 60s you still secretly use or collect? Transistor radios. Unlike the big, heavy tube radios that came before, transistor radios were small, light, and easy to carry around. They ran on batteries, so folks could take their music with them, whether they were hanging out at the beach, going on a road trip, or just strolling through town. For the first time, radio wasn't stuck in the living room. It was wherever you wanted it to be. Companies like Sony, Zenith, and RCA jumped in fast, making colorful, stylish models that didn't cost a fortune. Teenagers loved them. They'd tune into rock and roll stations like WABC or KFWB and feel like they had their own personal music player. To a lot of kids, that little radio meant freedom. It let them break away from the family radio and listen to whatever they wanted, whenever they wanted. Transistor radios stayed popular for a good while, but eventually things changed. Cassette players came along, then CDs, and now it's all about digital music and streaming. Still, transistor radios haven't disappeared. They're simple, reliable, and people still use them, especially when the power goes out or during emergencies. Adding machines. These sturdy machines were made for one job, doing the math, especially when it came to handling money. Adding machines weren't like your average calculator. They were built to take on big tasks like adding long columns of numbers, and they did it with spot-on accuracy. Each time you hit a key, the machine would register the number, and when you totaled it up, you'd hear a bell or a click. Most even printed the results on a paper tape so you had a clear record of the work. Before electronics took over, these machines were must-haves for accountants, office clerks, and store cashiers. In bookkeeping especially, they played a big role in keeping financial records neat and correct. Made from solid mechanical parts, they were built to last. With a little care, one could keep ticking away for decades. And people got used to the satisfying clack-clack sound as the machine crunched the numbers. But once the 1970s and 1980s rolled in, electronic calculators and computers started to take over. They were faster, easier to use, and could do a lot more. By the end of the century, most offices had moved on, and the old adding machine became a thing of the past. Portable phonographs. These elegant machines, often wrapped in polished wood or fine leather, were once the height of audio tech. Portable phonographs let folks bring their favorite tunes just about anywhere. Picnics, family get-togethers, or even outdoor dances. Wherever you went, music could follow. But unlike today's easy digital gadgets, using one took a bit of work. You'd have to set it up, place the record, and sometimes even turn a crank to get the turntable going. Back then, though, it was worth the effort. People loved the warm, rich sound that came from those spinning records. It turned any place into a little celebration. But as time marched on, these machines couldn't keep up. Radios, then cassette players came along and were simpler, smaller, and quicker to use. Eventually, everything went digital. Now we've got Bluetooth speakers and music apps that stream songs in seconds. Today, portable phonographs are mostly memories or collector's items. They had their moment, and for a while they brought joy and music wherever people gathered. But like many great inventions, they were eventually replaced by something newer and easier. Tube televisions. Tube televisions, or CRTS as they were called, used to be the center of every living room. Big and bulky, these box-shaped TVs brought families together for news, shows, and weekend movies. The way they worked was pretty fascinating for the time. Tiny beams of electrons would shoot across the screen, lighting up a picture right before your eyes. The quality wasn't perfect, but for that era, it felt like magic to see moving images in your own home. For decades, CRTs ruled the world of home entertainment. But as tech improved, these trusty sets started to feel outdated. Along came flat-panel TVs, LCDs, LEDs, and OLEDs that changed everything. They were thinner, lighter, showed clearer pictures with brighter colors, and used way less power. Slowly but surely, they took over, and the old tube TVs started disappearing from living rooms across the country. Nowadays, it's rare to spot a CRT in anyone's home. Most folks have upgraded to sleek screens that hang on the wall or sit neatly on a shelf. Still, there's something about those old sets that brings back memories, a bit of nostalgia for a time when flipping through channels was a family affair. Steel ice cube trays. Made from tough stainless steel, these old-school ice cube trays were built to take a beating and keep going. What made them stand out was the lever inside. After filling the tray with water and freezing it, you'd pull that lever, and with a satisfying snap, the ice would break free. That crisp, clink sound as the cubes dropped into a glass or sink was just part of everyday life in the kitchen. These trays weren't just strong, they were dependable. Unlike flimsy plastic ones, they held up for years, but they weren't perfect. If you filled them too full or didn't pull the lever just right, the cubes might crack or stick. Still, once you got the hang of it, they were simple to use, and a lot of folks swore by them. For a long time, they were just one of those things every freezer had. But by the time the 1990s rolled around, silicone trays took over. They were easier to handle, didn't need a lever, and you could just twist them to pop the ice right out. Softer, more flexible, and less likely to break, silicone quickly pushed the old steel trays aside. What was the one gadget you thought was pure magic as a kid? Let's hear your stories. Reel-to-reel tape recorders. Back in the 1960s and 1970s, if you wanted top-notch audio quality, reel-to-reel tape recorders were the way to go. These machines had two big reels. One fed the magnetic tape, and the other took it up as the sound played or was recorded. They weren't as compact as cassette tapes that came later, but their sound quality was hard to beat. Musicians, radio stations, and serious music lovers all swore by them for their crisp, full sound. These recorders were especially popular with folks who cared about capturing every detail. Whether it was a live concert, a radio show, or a studio session, reel-to-reel systems delivered rich, lifelike audio. That's why they became the go-to tool for anyone who wanted their recordings to sound just right. But as the years went on, technology moved forward. Smaller, easier to use formats like cassette tapes, CDs, and digital files took over. They were cheaper, more convenient, and didn't take up as much space. Still, reel-to-reel machines didn't completely vanish. Today, collectors and die-hard audio fans still treasure them for their warm, analog sound and the important role they played in the history of recorded music. Vinyl record cleaners. Vinyl record cleaners used to be a must-have for anyone serious about music. Back when LPs were the main way people listened to their favorite songs, keeping those records clean was key. Whether it was a soft brush, a special cloth, or a bottle of cleaning fluid, these tools helped clear off dust and grime that could mess with the sound. A well-cleaned record didn't just look better, it played smoother with less crackle and fewer skips, letting the rich, warm sound of vinyl really shine through. For true audiophiles, cleaning records was part of the ritual. It protected the grooves, preserved the sound, and kept the music experience top-notch. But over time, things started to shift. Digital music took over, first with CDs, then with downloads, and now with streaming. It was easier, faster, and didn't require any cleaning at all. Let's settle this. Was vinyl really better, or are we just feeling nostalgic? Home barometers. Home barometers, often framed in polished wood and glass, used to be a common sight in houses during the 19th and early 20th centuries. These elegant tools weren't just for show, they helped families keep an eye on the weather. By tracking changes in air pressure, the barometer's needle would shift, giving a good clue about what kind of weather was on the way. If it dropped, rain or a storm might be coming. If it rose, clear skies were likely ahead. It was like having a little weatherman right there on your wall. For generations, people relied on barometers to plan their days, especially in areas where the weather could change quickly. But as time went on, technology made things easier. Radar, satellites, and computer models started doing the job better and faster. Eventually, you didn't need a barometer to know if you should carry an umbrella. Carousel slide projectors. The carousel slide projector used to be a favorite way for families to relive memories together. First introduced by Kodak in 1961, this clever invention featured a rotating tray called a carousel that could hold dozens of slides at once. Each slide had to be loaded upside down and backwards, but once in place, the whole show ran smoothly. Instead of stopping to change every single slide by hand, the projector advanced them automatically with just the push of a button. Before this came along, viewing slides was a slow and fussy job. You had to load each one individually, adjust it, and then do it all over again for the next. Kodak's carousel changed that, making it easy to flip through a whole reel of photos without constantly fiddling with the machine. It was perfect for family events where proud parents could show off vacation shots or birthday memories while everyone gathered around in a darkened room. But like many great inventions, the carousel projector eventually lost its place. As digital cameras, smartphones, and screens took over, people no longer needed physical slides or bulky machines to share their photos. What was once a treasured part of family gatherings has become a nostalgic piece of history, remembered fondly but replaced by faster, simpler ways to relive the past. Zippered pencil cases for slide rules. Zippered pencil cases for slide rules were once a must-have for students, engineers, and scientists in the mid-1900s. Back then, when slide rules were the go-to tool for doing calculations, keeping them safe and organized was a top priority. These zippered cases were built tough and designed to carry more than just the slide rule. They kept everything neat and protected so nothing got lost or damaged. Inside, there were compartments for pencils, erasers, and even drafting tools, with some cases including a special slot just for the slide rule itself. That way, it wouldn't get scratched or bent. The cases had a clean, professional look that matched the serious work being done. For folks dealing with complex math and technical drawings, these cases weren't just handy, they were part of the job. Clothes, it was about creativity and self-expression. But things changed. As the fashion world moved forward, ready-to-wear clothing became more accessible and affordable. Technology brought in digital tools, and fewer people had the time or need to sew at home. Still, vintage patterns haven't disappeared. Collectors, designers, and nostalgic crafters still cherish them as a link to a time when making something by hand meant style, care, and pride in every stitch. Digital alarm clocks. Back in the day, digital alarm clocks were a must-have on every nightstand. They made sure you got up on time for work, school, or anything important. With their bright, easy-to-read numbers and sleek designs, they blended right into the bedroom decor. Some even came with bonus features like built-in radios or dual alarms, giving you more control over how and when you woke up. They were simple, dependable, and for a long time, they were the best way to stay on schedule. But then came smartphones. Suddenly, people had an alarm, clock, calendar, and music player all in one. That shift changed everything. More and more folks started using their phones to wake up, check the time, and plan their day. As a result, digital alarm clocks slowly began to disappear. While a few people still keep one around as a backup or just out of habit, most now lean on their phones. What do you think? Could bringing back these forgotten habits make a difference today? Let us know in the comments. If you enjoyed this trip down memory lane, be sure to subscribe and share Past Not Past with someone who remembers. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.